If the Jets trade down in the 2025 NFL Draft, they can still address one of their biggest needs in the first round. There are two players who should be on their radar if they trade down. We'll discuss who they are today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, April 22nd, 2025. And I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, on today's show, we're going to have our weekly mailbag. The NFL Draft begins tomorrow, so unsurprisingly, most of our questions today will be about the NFL Draft. Thanks so much to everybody who sent in questions. Let's begin. John, imagine that the Jets trade down in the first round of the NFL Draft. We've talked a lot about players like McMillan, Membu, and Warren. If the Jets trade down, however, who do you think would be on their radar? And that's a great question. You know, we don't really have a good sense of what the Jets are going to do right now. I mean, I don't think it would be a shock to see the Jets trade up. I don't think it would be a shock to see them stay put. I don't think it would be a shock to see them trade down. You know, we don't have a good sense of the Glenn Muggi philosophy. And, you know, it's difficult to say exactly, you know, how much they like the guys in this draft class. And of course, it's always possible, you know, they're really zeroed in on one player, and that player could go before 7. And if that happens, the Jets could be very open to a trade down. So it's difficult. You know, all this is to say, like, there are possibilities out there. I think part of the question would be, how far would they trade down? Now, at this point, it really feels like the big two needs on this team are right tackle and wide receiver. And I think how far they trade down could determine, you know, what direction they go in. I think if they traded down like maybe a couple of slots, a guy who I think could very well be on the radar is Kelvin Banks, who's a tackle out of Texas. And he's kind of got like the profile of somebody who could be a power tackle, you know, a guy who can really move people in the run game. You know, Olu Fashanu is pretty much locked in at left tackle. Fashanu is a good pass protector. He can improve as a run blocker, but, you know, I think Fashanu is always going to make his money as a pass protector. I don't think he's ever going to be like a road grader in the run game, which means, you know, you should probably try and pair Fashanu with a really strong run blocker at the right tackle position. Now, Banks was a guy who mostly played left tackle in college, but, you know, you flip him around, you give him a full training camp to work at right tackle. I think it could work. And then, you know, you've got a line where you have 3 on the right side of your line. You've got Banks, you've got AVT, Elijah Vera Tucker, and then you've got Joe Tippmann. You have three guys who are pretty strong run blockers. So you could run the ball to the right side and you have quality pass protection with Fashanu at left tackle. So I think that Banks would probably be a guy who would be on their Jets radar if they traded down a couple of slots. I think if they traded down like 10 slots or more, maybe 10, 15 slots, I think then you might look at wide receiver. A guy I have my eye on is Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State, you know, the latest in a long line of great Ohio State receivers, one of whom's already benefited the Jets. That's Garrett Wilson. But, you know, you look at the talent at wide receiver that Ohio State has produced through the years, whether, you know, you want to talk Garrett, you want to talk Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., you know, even Jameson Williams, who played his last year at Alabama, but came from Ohio State before then. And I'm sure there's a couple of guys I'm missing. Egbuka is like not an overwhelming athlete, but, you know, he's a pretty refined receiver, a guy who I think is going to step in and hit the ground running. You know, he might not be like the alpha guy on an offense. He may not be the guy you run your passing game through, but Jets don't need that. Jets need someone who can complement. Oh, you'd love to have it, but Jets really need more than anything somebody who can complement Garrett Wilson. And I think that, you know, once we get into like the late teens, early 20s, that's where Egbuka possibly could be an option. So, you know, the bigger point here is that, you know, there are a lot of people oppose a trade down, no matter where you are in the draft. I mean, you could be in the top 5, you could be the mid first round, it could be late first round, you could get day 2 or day 3. People always oppose the trade down because they say, well, you're losing your chance at better prospects. Yeah, but you know what? There are always good. There always going to be good prospects available. There are high end caliber prospects available throughout the entirety of the first round, and I think that the Jets could address either of their core needs in a trade down scenario. And, frequently what happens in the NFL draft is like the second or third guy who goes into position has a better career than the first guy. The NFL is good at like telling you who can play and who can't, but they're not always great at telling you who's the elite who's the cream of the cream. They're always they're good at they're typically good at separating out the guys who can play versus the guys who really aren't very good. But among like the elite, that they have a tough time ranking them. And that's another reason that trade downs are typically a pretty good idea. Our next question, John, who do you think could be a pick the Jets make who is not getting a lot of attention right now? So, as I mentioned earlier, the guys who are generating a lot of attention are Tyler Warren out of Penn State, Armand Membu out of Missouri. Those seem to be like the two guys who are generating the most buzz. And then, you have Ted McMillan maybe a little bit. And, if Mason Graham falls, I think he could be an option. The guy who's not generating a lot of attention, who I wouldn't be shocked if the pick would be Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. And he's kind of like had a process where his stock has fallen a bit. I mean, he hasn't had like a catastrophic fall, but it felt like at the start of the process, he was viewed as kind of the consensus top lineman, and he's fallen a little bit. And Membu has risen, and I'm always a little bit weary about movement after the game's end because these players have put a lot on film. They've shown you how they can play, and of course, like physical attributes matter to an extent, but I do think sometimes people get a little carried away with the significance of physical attributes. And it feels like, to me, the biggest issue people have with Will Campbell is his arm length, 32 inches and 5/8. And, typically in the NFL these days, teams are looking for arms that are at least 33 inches. So I think, Campbell falls about 3/8 of an inch short of that in arm length. And look, arm length can matter at tackle. We've talked a lot about this. I mean, if you're an everydayer, you've heard me mention this. Because it's really important to maintain the center of gravity. You really need to have a center of balance. You can't lean as an offensive lineman, but to be able to strike the first punch, you have to have long arms. Otherwise, you're going to end up leaning. When you lean, guys who are as strong as NFL defensive ends will throw you aside. But I also believe that you reach a point where maybe these guys get overanalyzed because there's so much on the line. Jobs are made and broken by how first round picks perform, that sometimes teams like go a little overboard with judging this stuff. I mean, will Will Campbell really be that much better of a prospect if his arms were 3/8 of an inch longer? Is he really that much of a worse prospect that his arms aren't? Is there that big of a difference between 32 inches and 5/8 and 33 inches? I mean, it just means the other parts of your game have to be better. But, you look at him, I think he's a pretty good athlete. I think he can protect the edge fine. I think he's good at, kind of mirroring. I mean, you're kind of like following what the other guy is going to do and having a counter for that. I still think he's a really good prospect. And, Membu has gotten most of the buzz. And now there's a chance Membu could be the first offensive lineman off the board. But we know the Jets need help at the tackle position. That right tackle spot's a huge problem right now for this team. And, because of his arm length, now people are asking, is Campbell going to have to kick inside to guard? Well, like his arms might be a little shorter than his ideal, but there have been tackles who have succeeded with his arm length in the NFL. It's not like it's an unprecedented thing. I believe in getting as much information on these prospects as possible, but at some point, if you thought he had the skills to play in the NFL at the tackle position 4 months ago, how much of a difference should 3/8 of an inch in your arm length really make? I think sometimes people are dismissive about concerns over players because, sometimes guys are better college players than they are in the pros. Like people point to college production and say, well, this guy was a great college player. Well, we all know that being a great college player doesn't guarantee you're going to be great in the pros. We all know that, producing in college doesn't mean you're going to produce at the same level in the NFL. But at the same time, he was being judged as an elite prospect 4 months ago. And I think that maybe he's a little bit of a victim of overanalysis over something that's significant, but not like a deal breaker. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to a player who very well could be the pick at 7 on Thursday night. That's Tyler Warren at Penn State. And I made it clear, I don't want Tyler Warren at 7. Does that mean I'd be against Tyler Warren later on? Well, the answer is no, and I'll explain why as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Because right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. You gotta love how FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Very exciting NBA playoffs this year. Knicks are involved. If you're a New York fan, also, I mean, that Western Conference is going to be wild this year, and even the East. The East has some compelling teams. Well, FanDuel's the place to get in on the action, whether your favorite team's in it or not. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Again, FanDuel.com to claim that $250 in bonus bets today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Let's continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question comes from Taylor, who writes, John, we know well your doubts about taking Tyler Warren, but let's face it, the Jets are going to jet, and that's probably what they intend to do. Would you feel better about the pick if it came as part of a trade down where we landed some extra picks in the process? Yeah, well, look, I mean, one thing I will say is that if you ever get mad at my opinion about what the Jets should do, just consider that the Jets never do what I want them to do. So if I'm telling, if you disagree with me on something when I say the Jets should do something, odds are you're going to get your way because the Jets never ever listen to me. And yeah, like I have expressed concerns about taking Tyler Warren 7th overall. But to answer Taylor's question, if the Jets traded down and got Warren, would I be happier with that? The answer is 100% absolutely. And there's a difference between me saying the Jets should not take Tyler Warren at 7 and me saying the Jets should not take Tyler Warren at any point in the draft. I mean, here, the comparison I would draw is like, I can go out to a restaurant and have a meal that I love. I think it's just like, it's a great meal. And then the bill comes and I'd look at it. And even though I had a great meal, it would be like, wait, how am I paying this much money? This isn't worth the amount. This isn't worth that much money. In this case, like the pick you use is kind of like the price you pay. It's kind of the amount of the bill. Would I take Tyler Warren 7th overall? I mean, that's awfully pricey for, I think, the type of prospect Tyler Warren is. If you take Tyler Warren later, I mean, look, there is upside here. This guy does have potential to be quite a good tight end in this league, and you're adding extra chances to add good players. I'd be very happy with that scenario. I think the issue with Tyler Warren at 7 is people will say, well, I already know what the rebuttals are to me not wanting Tyler Warren. People say, well, a great tight end is a game changer. Look at all the top teams in the NFL that have great tight end play. Great tight ends impossible to match up with. And that's correct. But the question is, whether Tyler Warren's a great tight end, and you can give an estimate on that, but nobody knows for sure right now. This goes back to something I speak about frequently. It's easy. It's relatively easy, at least. It's not a slam dunk, but it's relatively easy to figure out guys who can play versus guys who can't. It's more difficult to separate good from great. And I think in the NFL draft, there's frequently kind of like a lack of humility about, people come to definitive conclusions on players. And look, people do a lot of research to it. I respect that. People certainly put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to evaluating prospects, but you also have to consider maybe you could be wrong about it. And you have to consider how will things turn out if I'm wrong? Because believe it or not, scouts make mistakes. I'm going to tell you something shocking, something you may not believe. Sometimes the Jet scouts don't get it right. Sometimes the Jet scouts are a little bit wrong on prospects. So I think you also have to think through when you're making a pick, okay, this is how good I think the guy's going to be. But what if he's only 75% as good as I think he's going to be? Well, if he's only 50% as good as I think he's going to be. And you build in kind of some margin for error, especially with early picks, because let's use Ted McMillan out of Arizona, for example. Let's say, hypothetically, for the sake of argument, you think he's going to be a CeeDee Lamb, like Justin Jefferson type of impact receiver. Well, you could be wrong. What if he's only 75% that good? Well, maybe then he's only a Garrett Wilson. But you know what? Garrett Wilson is still a really good pick. You get a Garrett Wilson at 7, that's still a really good pick. You may think Tyler Warren is going to be, the next George Kittle. And if he is the next George Kittle, he's absolutely worth the 7th overall pick. But what if you're wrong? What if he's only 75% as good? I mean, is he only Tyler Conklin then? And you shouldn't need the 7th overall pick to get Tyler Conklin. So that's kind of, and I don't know, maybe Conklin's 50% is good. But you see my point is that the NFL last year, only 3 tight ends had 1,000 yards. 21 wide receivers did. So you can get the 20th most productive receiver, and you're still getting a 1,000-yard guy. you get the fourth most productive tight end, and you're not getting a 1,000-yard guy. And in today's NFL, I mean, tight ends, yeah, I know they block, but most of the value you get from a tight end is as a receiver. So yeah, I think I'm not saying Tyler Warren couldn't be worth the 7th overall pick, but I think like it's a little early. I think if you get later, it's easier to justify. If you trade down, I don't know, 15 slots or so, and Tyler Warren's still there, and you add extra picks, then it's much easier to justify taking someone like Warren, because then there's less risk. There's less risk involved. You're not paying as high of a price for him, and you're getting extra picks in return. So yeah, I think I would definitely say that. I think that's, if they traded down, I'd have much less of an issue with it. And look, if they draft him at 7, look, there is a scenario where it can work out. I'm not saying it's destined to fail. I'm not suggesting by any means that Tyler Warren's a bad prospect. I'm just saying, like, I think that's an awfully risky pick to take at 7, and I think that there would be a lot of downside to that pick. Next question, John. We always talk about trading down, but isn't it true that some team has to be willing to trade down for the Jets to do it? Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mentioned that yesterday when we talked about the scenario where Shedeur Sanders falls. I mean, it's possible the Jets could be able to trade down if he's there at 7, but you don't know. If Shedeur Sanders falls to 7, it means that like nobody traded into the top 6 for him, so it's not a slam dunk they'll get to 7. I mean, what I would say is that generally speaking, the teams that draft best are the teams that have the most picks, because they give themselves extra swings of the bat. I think that in any scenario, it's not a guarantee that a team's going to want to trade down with you. The team will be able to trade down. What I say is, like, when I judge a front office on whether they're willing to trade down, I do it like over like a long 5-year period, because I think like over 5 years, the luck evens out. Odds are over the course of 5 years, you're going to be in a situation where somebody will be on the phone offering you a trade down. And that's I think you look at over the long haul how often teams are willing to trade down, how often teams do trade down, because at any point when you're on the clock, you may just not get a good deal offered to you. Nobody may be interested in moving to your slot, but at some point, if you're a GM for multiple years, you will have opportunities to add extra picks through the trade down. And the question I have is, how often do you do it? How often do you take it? Not every trade down is successful. Sometimes you're better off staying where you are. I mean, I could go back to 1997 when the Jets traded down twice in the first round and passed on not one, but 2 future Hall of Fame tackles. Orlando Pace, they had the number 1 pick. They traded down with the Rams. Rams took Pace. They traded down a second time with Seattle. Seattle took Walter Jones. So the Jets lost out on 2 Hall of Fame tackles. Trading down is not always the right move, but history has shown us that more often than not, it's good to trade down. The teams that trade down typically win the trades, not 100% of the time, but more than 50% of the time. So I think it's good to trade down. I'm a fan of trading down typically, but you can never be assured that that's going to be an option. That it takes 2 to tango, as the saying goes, and there's not always 2 to tango. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about the quarterback position. Is it a good idea to take a quarterback every year? I think the answer is yes. So which quarterback should the Jets have their eyes on if they don't go with one of the top guys? Well, I think that a lot of the conventional wisdom on this is wrong. A lot of people would tell you that you need to find the guy with the rocket arm, the guy with the physical tools. I think you got to go in a different direction. I'll explain why as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed series like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're doing our weekly mailbag show. Let's continue our next question. John, are you a believer in the idea that a team should draft a quarterback every year? If so, which quarterbacks would you like to see the Jets draft this year? And there's actually a Hall of Fame general manager, Ron Wolf, who was with the Packers in the 1990s, and he really subscribed to the theory that a team should draft a quarterback every year. And the Packers ended up drafting guys like Mark Brunell, Matt Hasselbeck, even Aaron Brooks, guys who went on to other teams and ended up becoming quality starters. Wolf was a believer that you could never have too much depth at the quarterback position. And I think that that's an accurate statement. I don't think teams invest enough at the quarterback position. One of the weird things about the NFL is that everybody agrees quarterback's the most important spot on the field. But if you invest in it a lot, you get criticism. It's like the idea is like if you have more than one, if you have you already have a starting quarterback, you should not expend any further resources at the position. And if you look at how backup quarterbacks perform, and if you consider how a backup quarterback can save or sink your season, I would argue the team should probably invest more at the position and invest more in trying to find quality players at the position. I always hear the argument, well, why would you invest in a player who you hope never sees the field? Well, it's for the same reason you buy insurance for it. I mean, in your daily life, don't you buy insurance even though it only comes into play when a situation it's a situation you hope it doesn't happen? I mean, isn't that common sense? Is it a good idea to not prepare for a bad situation just because you hope it doesn't happen? So yeah, I like the idea of drafting a quarterback every year, and I this goes hand in hand with another thing that I really believe in, is that you should try and add extra draft picks, because if we're gonna be honest, most quarterback picks don't pan out, and that's one of the reasons you should keep trying to draft guys, because you should just keep drafting guys and trying to develop them. But you have to acknowledge that they're not all going to work out. So you don't want to waste a pick every year that you can't get back. You want it to kind of be like a bonus pick where you already have your full allotment and you can use an extra pick to draft a quarterback. Now, I think that the mistake teams make on day 3 of the draft is they always draft some guy with a rocket arm who doesn't really understand how to read the defense. And they think, well, we could teach him the other stuff. And in reality, these guys never learn. It's not that easy to start from square one and figure out how to play the quarterback position. You have a better shot of going with a guy who's maybe less physically overwhelming, but who understands passing concepts, who understands how to read a defense. I mean, if you look at the guy, there aren't many day 3 success stories, but to the extent there are guys who are day 3 success stories, it's almost never the players who are the physical specimens. It's not always the guy with it's all very seldom the guy with the rocket arm who needs to learn how to play. It's more frequently the guy who's maybe less physically overwhelming, but a guy who understands how to run an offense. I mean, there aren't that many day 3 guys who have gone on to have success as starters in the league. But think about Dak Prescott, you can think about Kirk Cousins, you could think about Brock Purdy. I mean, none of these guys had a huge arm. None of these guys were viewed as elite arm talents. What they did is they understood how to run an offense. They understood how to go through progressions. Now, Prescott ran at Mississippi State. Prescott kind of ran a spread system that didn't have as many pro concepts in it, but you could see while he was at Mississippi State that he had a good understanding of passing concept. He stepped right into the Dallas Cowboys as a rookie and played really well and led the Cowboys to the 1 seed back in 2016 as a 4th round pick. Tony Romo got injured that year and Prescott took over and pretty much just took the job and never looked back. And a year later, Tony Romo was on CBS. So who are the guys that fit that mold? And I want to be clear that I don't think either of these guys is very likely to succeed, but we're talking about maybe somebody who's round 5, round 6. The 2 guys I would look to would be out of Oregon, Dylan Gabriel, and out of Indiana, Curtis Rourke, both guys with extensive starting experience. And I value experience as a starter in college because I don't think there's any substitute for actual game action. It's very difficult to develop as a quarterback unless you're on the field. And once you get to the NFL, you really can't throw a project out there because you're trying to win games. So the only way to get a guy a game experience in the NFL is to put him on the field during regular season games, and teams are trying to win. There's no minor leagues. I think the one reason I think the NFL would benefit from a true minor league system is that there are players out there who would benefit from getting game reps but not have to deal with the pressure of being their team's quarterback. So I like the idea of guys who understand passing concepts. I like the idea of guys who, with a lot of experience going up against different defensive looks. The question with both these guys is, do they have the physical tools to play in the NFL? Because I don't think like having the biggest arm is really that significant. I mean, there are a couple throws you can hit that maybe other guys can't, but it's much tougher to like figure out how to play the game. It's much tougher to figure out like to learn how to go through progressions and throw the ball with anticipation and throw the ball on time. That said, like your arm needs to hit a certain threshold. You need to have a certain threshold, and Gabriel's also undersized. So my guess is both of these guys would probably top out as backups. But you never know, and I think like sometimes we're a little too dismissive of the idea of a quarterback ceiling. I think sometimes we kind of like we judge guys and we say, well, this guy's never going to be more than their backup, but it's based on physical attributes, and quarterback's not a position where physical attributes are the most important thing. Quarterback is very much a thinking position. It's a position where you're being a technician is important. It's about scanning a defense, throwing the ball with accuracy on time, throwing with anticipation. These aren't things that are physical attributes. It's not about being the tallest guy. It's not about having the biggest arm. That's the mindset I would have evaluating quarterbacks, and that's the mindset I would have if I was making a pick. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast for us, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow on draft day. Can't wait to talk to you then.